good. So my name is Semi Bird. Semi is my middle name. Misipati is my formal first name. My father was Black and American Samoan, and he was born in American Samoa, and so I have quite the cultural background. And my mom was Black, and both are passed right now. So I started out in the inner city ghetto of East Oakland, California, born without civil rights. And so today, the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington, and that powerful, most beautiful speech from Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Means everything to me. He meant everything to me, and to this day, he means everything to me. And I guess I would say that every day I wake up, for the most powerful and positive reasons, I walk in that shadow, proudly, for every reason of unity of America and what America stands for. America was the nation of diversity, the nation of diversity, because people came from all walks of life, all races, all cultures, all backgrounds, different languages, and they came here for a new way of life, freedom, liberty, opportunity. That's what America is. I'm going to go back to my background, but that was important, and today we honor that. It was more than just fighting for equality, and by the way, not equity of outcome, equality of opportunity. Mom moved us to Seattle, Washington, and my mother, a single woman with 7 children. So the strength of who I am started with the strength of the most powerful woman I've ever known in my entire life. So that love, compassion, and strength is what I also try to emulate, besides Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So Mom raised me on scripture and asked for a verse every night, asked for a word every night, because she thought the love of Christ and the word of man, education, and fellowship would lead me to be successful in life. I believe that to this day. And Mom moved us to Seattle. I was raised in Seattle. We went there when I was 7 years old, so I've been a Washington citizen since I was 7 years old. I'm 62 years old now, so do some math on that one. Raised in Seattle, started out in the Central District. Mom, because she continued to persist in trying to grow our family, she sacrificed all for us kids, looking for a better life for us. So we progressed. As Mom got a better job, we moved a little further north, and I ended up in northern Seattle, where I dropped out of high school from Shorewood High School. Terrible grades, K through 11, terrible grades, K through 12, yeah, not good. My wife even said, "Oh my Lord, honey." So there's my grades. Joined the Marine Corps because they had the best looking uniforms. Did 2 enlistments, got my Good Conduct Medal, Expeditionary, Sea Service Deployment, Honorable Discharge, my high school diploma. Mom made sure of that. And I got my bachelor's degree a little bit later, summa cum laude, and 4.0 GPA, Business Administration, Master's degree of Science, Human Resource Development. I do labor relations, performance improvement, leadership development. We can talk maybe later on that. But 16 years later, I found myself post 9/11 enlisting in the Army and joining Army Special Forces. I became a Special Forces Green Beret when I was 43 years of age. So I was the oldest from my demographic to ever become an Army Special Forces Green Beret. Apparently, that's not average. So every team I ever served on, they would put a walker taped with camouflage and tennis balls because they thought that was funny. Then we would go for a vigorous run, just to show how funny I was. Anyway, served combat, Bronze Star Valor, Purple Heart, Meritorious Service Medal. I was fortunate and blessed in combat, steel sharpens steel, I guess, but mostly, as I was sharing with a friend earlier, who I am as a person who loves people, who values life, who seeks harmony at every turn. That's who I am by personality. Overseas, that's what I did for a living, and I was very skilled at my occupation. Went into intelligence, Special Forces intelligence. I worked as an operator in intelligence. I worked my way up into intelligence and operations leadership. I worked out of embassies. My last assignment was an advisor to an ambassador in Bangladesh. I was also the Security Forces Assistance Manager. I have 2 languages in addition to English, so that would be Spanish and Mandarin Chinese. I'm losing proficiency in both, but I worked fighting narco-terrorism and weapons of mass destruction. So South and Central America is not a strange territory to me, nor the Caribbean. Asia, the Asia Pacific is not a stranger to me. I worked in Taiwan, now that that's unclassified. I spent a lot of time working there as well, fighting against the One China policy, and throughout the Asia Pacific. I left active duty. I went to work for the United States Department of Energy. I was going to go to the CIA, but we got pregnant with my youngest child. I took a choice of family over career, which is always the right choice, and worked my way up from GS nothing to GS 14 out of 15. What else? Retired from DOE, retired from the United States military, went to work for WSU, taught at WSU, wrote leadership for WSU, taught that at WSU, hung my own shingle. I'm a behavioral scientist. I am a performance improvement consultant. Hospitals, corporations, any industry, governments, US and foreign, I help improve performance. I help leaders become better leaders. Lean Six Sigma methodology, human performance improvement technology, value stream mapping, audits, financial audits, performance audits, assessments, behavioral, scientific, psychometric assessments. Those are my wheelhouse. I'm going to stop there and then hand it over, but I love what I did. I stopped what I did so that I can run for governor in November of last year. I've been traveling the entire state, worked 6 and 7 days a week, traveling the entire state, doing this so that I can meet with people. And what I want people to know about me is, I always tell people, I'm not a politician. And in no disrespect, I value those who serve. It's just a different way of serving. But I think it's time for people to understand self-governance and how this nation was established on self-governance, and that the power has always been intended to be with the people, and that it should always be the people that make the decisions for our government, and not the government that makes the decisions for the people. And I lastly will say, this is my lastly, I promise. It's time to put people over politics. As Mark sits here next to me, I see a kind man, and I know him to be a kind man. And I see him as a peer. I see him as a brother. And I will never, ever attack him on the campaign trail or any other time, because I'm sick of politics. It's evil. I'm sick of party. If this wasn't a two-party state, and I'm proud of the R that I claim, again, Reconstruction, abolition, women's rights. I mean, I'm proud of that. But it's become so terribly divisive. And it's the people that suffer because of party politics. And I would just say no. I admire independence because you get a choice to sit back and go, yeah, I see knuckleheads on both sides. I see misrepresentation on both sides, and I choose to stay out of that nonsense. I would love to stay out of that nonsense because I see common sense is what Washington State needs. Okay, time to be quiet and hand the mic over. Thank you.
Thank you, Semi. Thank you for your public service as well to the United States of America. That's really admirable. My personal background is I was born and raised in Tukwila, so I went to a small high school there called Foster High School. It's like 5 minutes from the airport. You can hear the planes flying overhead as you're in class all day, every day. And, in high school, people always say, did you want to get into politics? Was that like your goal as a kid? The answer is no. It wasn't on my radar screen at all when I was growing up. I was convinced in high school that I was going to become a professional tennis player. And that was kind of like, people say, what do you want to do? And I'm like, I'm a professional tennis player. I actually went to college at University of Redlands outside of LA for a couple of years, played tennis. While I was at LA at Redlands playing tennis, like Pete Sampras literally won the US Open, and we're basically the same age. And it was kind of like my wake-up call that I probably wasn't going to become a professional tennis player. And I might want to change my life and focus a little bit more on academics. So I ended up transferring to Indiana University, where I got a degree in finance. And after I graduated from Indiana, I ended up working in finance for the first, hey, there's Richard DeVoe, he's a local celebrity. So I worked in finance for a Swiss bank called UBS, and my first 2 years were actually on the Philadelphia Stock Exchange, where I worked on the night shift. So we had to show up at 1:30 in the morning because they were on European hours. I did that for a couple of years, and then an opportunity came up where they were like, hey, we want someone to come to the London trading desk. I was like, I will move from Philly to London in a heartbeat. That sounds like the best idea ever. I don't have to get up in the middle of the night anymore. And I love that job. I did it for 5 years, where I worked in London then for UBS, and it got to the point where, and this sounds weird, I think, for people, if you haven't worked overseas, even when you're American, if you have a kid working overseas, like all my American friends in London their kids spoke with a British accent. And I was like, oh, that's kind of weird for me to think about my child having a British accent. I was like, I would like to try to move home to have kids so I'm a little bit closer to family, and nothing against the British accent. I think it's, I like Hugh Grant. But the end result was an opportunity with Bank of America came up where I ended up moving back to New York City. And I worked for them for 5 years. And that's when we started having kids. And it was a lot better place to have kids, I felt, than having them in London. But then 5 years after that, Isabel, my oldest daughter, who's a junior up at Western Washington University in Bellingham now, she was 3 years old, and I was working in New York City, and I had this kind of epiphany, like, hey, I love growing up in the Northwest. It was, I thought, the best place you could raise a family in the United States. I realized my kid was going to be not denied that same opportunity if I didn't make a life choice and actually move back home. That basically meant leaving the job I had had since college. And so I ended up making that choice where when Isabel was 3 and Eloise wasn't even 1 year old yet, we ended up moving back home. And I just kind of had a whole life reset. And so I left the finance business. I ended up becoming a guinea pig for a local Seattle pizza restaurant called Zeke's, the franchise guinea pig of Zeke's Pizza. So I opened up a Zeke's Pizza restaurant a couple blocks from my house in Issaquah, which then led to a Ben & Jerry's ice cream store the following year. And the end result is now I have 4 Ben & Jerry's ice cream stores, plus my pizza restaurant, and that's my life outside of the legislature. I'm actually the only small business owner in the Senate Democratic Caucus in Olympia. In terms of public service, like people say, well, where did that come from? And what ended up happening during those times when I was living in London, so my dad, I was born and raised in Centralia. He was a contractor growing up. He remodeled kitchens predominantly and other home projects and stuff like that. But my dad actually became the mayor of Centralia from 99 through 07. And that was like my first exposure to local public service. I think up until that point in my life, I think I was like a lot of Americans where you just focus on the presidential stuff. This is the president, these are the politics, that's what you see on TV every night. When my dad became mayor of Tukwila, I was like, wow, you can have a huge positive impact on people's lives through local public service. And so I kind of made that choice when I moved back home. This was going to be how I was going to invest a lot of my time and energy was in local public service. So I actually went to the UW to get a master's in public affairs because I didn't have any background in that side of life. It was all finance background. And then I ran for the Issaquah City Council in 2009 successfully. And then I ran for the state senate in 2012 successfully. And so that's what I've been doing, pizza and ice cream from basically May through December. Richard DePolt and I worked together in Olympia a long time. January through April, we're in session down there. I've just done that commute back and forth from Olympia to Issaquah every day during session. My wife and I have 6 kids right now. So it's, Isabel's the oldest. She's a junior up at Western. Penelope's the youngest. She's in 8th grade. And so 3 are in college, 3 are still with us at home. And the anxiety, people say, why'd you want to run for governor? And it really came down to this anxiety that when Isabel finishes school in a couple of years, we're nervous if she can afford to stay in Washington and live here and raise her own family. And to me, what I say to my Democratic colleagues in Olympia is, we have been in charge. This has happened on our watch, in charge of the state of Washington, where it's become unaffordable to the point where I am now nervous that my own kids won't be able to stay and raise their own families here. And if that isn't a wake-up call to all of us that we need different leadership, I don't know what is. In the same token, you have this public safety challenge where growing up, it's like, well, look, we went downtown to Seattle all the time. Had no anxiety about going down to Seattle. The second you got your driver's license, that was something you did. I know from my own experience, 4 of my kids drive, they have a different feeling when it comes to going to downtown Seattle. And so I know when it comes to both affordability and public safety, those are 2 issues that we have to do better on if our state is ever going to achieve its full potential. And that's why I got into the governor's race, and I look forward to answering people's questions today.
So in terms of policy, and I appreciate everything Mark said, absolutely, in public safety. When it comes to public safety, our police officers are demonized. They're not supported. We have officers who feel that anytime they roll out in a call, they're going out there and their backs aren't covered. They're worried, I'm going to get sued. A call goes sideways, I'm going to get sued. My family. And here's something, so what people don't know, when I say I served in intelligence or I served in counter-narco-terrorism, human trafficking and all that other stuff, we are trained at a very advanced level, all the way down to understand local policies for law enforcement, through state, through federal. I have stood a joint interagency task force, working with CIA, DEA, DIA, every agency specific to task force and strategic implementation, targeting, interdicting, and removing criminal syndicates and terrorist threats. Locally, the problems that we have, not only not supporting our law enforcement, we're not resourcing our law enforcement, we're not empowering our law enforcement, and the fact that I'm out there with them, with these ride-alongs and talking to them, we have officers that are slow. It sounds terrible. Some are so discouraged, it's affecting their performance of duty. Why would I arrive in a scene, right at the height of the scene, knowing that it can go sideways and there goes my career, there goes my family? We have law enforcement officers right now who are waiting for a disposition on an internal investigation. They were released to go back to serve, but this is still hanging in their head because the final board has not met because they're backlogged. I know an officer that wants to interstate transfer, lateral to another department out of state, but he can't leave because although he's in the streets every day putting his life on the line, he is still technically waiting for that final board release. So law enforcement, yeah, we need to resource them, but we also need to change the perception of law enforcement. There's a lot. How are we going to plus them up? There's two ways to become law enforcement. One is through the academy process. The other is through lateral transfer. We should start a pipeline recruiting law enforcement at the middle school level. You know, I was thinking, yeah, high school, freshmen up, pipeline, get them ready. Trades, get them ready. That makes sense. But the mindset needs to start in middle school. Mentorship programs early on. We should have school resource officers in every single school from elementary, middle, and high school, not just high school. So on a public safety side, there's a lot of things we should be doing. Our judges, our prosecutors, they're not being held accountable for catch and release. We have law enforcement that put their lives on the line, but we have judges and prosecutors who are not doing their job, honoring their oath, and prosecuting criminals. But then again, look at our laws. Look at the laws. And again, as I respect those who would serve in legislature, much of what we're talking about, what we see in the streets, right? 51% increase in murder, 73% increase in property crime, 95% increase in murder. We're number 3 in the nation for auto theft. Much of this can be traced in terms of cause and effect back to bad laws passed by our representatives in office right now. Yes, not only do we need new leadership, well, certainly who's approving these bad laws, but we have to step. Where do these laws come from? That is the problem. Non-pursuit, the blight fix, which is not a fix. My friends, there's a lot of work to be done. So just on public safety, we need to hold individuals accountable. We need to move forward with real solutions, with actions that'll make our citizens safe. Homelessness. Homelessness is out of control. How much money have we spent? Over $1 billion. Now they'll say $800 million, and our CEO of the state and Attorney General will say, oh, we need to go big so they can go home. And that was a cute statement for a minute, except big means more taxpayer dollars. And homelessness is up 11%, and that is a false number, I'm telling you. I'm a statistician, I'm a strategist. That is a false number. Not only is it up way more than that, and the money they say that they're spending, which goes to these industrial complexes, no, we need action on homeless. I will declare a state of emergency to ensure that we have the resources level and leverage to mitigate homelessness. Compassion is not giving them more needles. It's not giving them more safe spaces to die slowly in the streets. Compassion is to uphold our laws, clean up our streets, get them into residency programs, reinvest in our mental health infrastructure. We have an epidemic of addiction and an epidemic of mental health. We're in crisis and we need actions. I want to stop there so I can give time back to Mark so he can share his vision, etc. So if it's okay, I'd like to do that so I'm not dominating the airspace.
I think with public safety, I think we have a lot in common on this issue. This was a big reason for me to run for this office. You know, I'm proud to have endorsements from, well, there's a couple different folks in the law enforcement community. You have WACOPs, who are a lot of the troopers on the ground, and then you have WASPIC, which is the police and sheriffs. I am proud to have the support from those groups, and I think it goes back to 2020, where when the defund the police conversation started in June of 2020, I didn't get caught up in it. And for me, it goes back to, you know, my wife Kelly is an elementary school teacher in Issaquah. There's bad teachers in a school district. You don't solve that problem by defunding the school. You solve that problem by focusing on who are the bad teachers and how do you either remove that teacher or change their behavior so they're no longer a bad teacher. And I never got swept up in that political windsock with the rest of my fellow Democrats. And then you fast forward to the session last year in Olympia, where we had this police pursuit bill we needed to pass off the floor of the Senate. And I was very vocal that this needs an up or down vote by the Senate chamber before we leave session. And it came down to 21 Republicans plus me saying this bill deserves an up or down vote. I was the only Senate Democrat who actually broke from the party to say the police pursuit bill deserves an up or down vote. It didn't pass in the 22 session, it did pass in the 23 session. I actually think the fix around drug possession, you know, I give, you know, your local senator here, John Braun, huge kudos on that fix, because he played a critical role, because I think you had a couple choices around drug possession, which way you could go. The reality was the Supreme Court, not the legislature, decriminalized drugs in the state of Washington back in the 21 session. We needed to pass a bill to make sure there was accountability for people, you know, who are using drugs in public. And the end result, I thought Senator John Braun did a good job on this issue, was if he had said it has to be a felony charge, it would have never passed, because you wouldn't have gotten that. If you said it was just a simple misdemeanor, like a lot of the folks on one side of the further left side of the political spectrum wanted, that wouldn't have had the accountability you needed in the law. So we ended up settling on this gross misdemeanor for public drug possession. I actually think it was a really good bill. It passed the Senate 43-6. I was a co-sponsor of that bill. It's a treatment-focused bill. It says, hey, we want to get folks treatment first, but if they're going to refuse treatment for whatever reason, there is accountability. You can't end up spending time in jail under the current law that was passed by the legislature. I think it does have real teeth. And I think when you talk about, well, how do you actually move the needle in the space, I think you have to break this silo way of thinking. And I think, you know, Representative Bull can appreciate this from his time in the legislature. You have city and county problems. That's normally where public safety lies. So normally, police and fire is all supported through city and county level. I came to the Issaquah City Council. It was a big line item in our budget. The challenge we had in Olympia is we were flush with cash after COVID. We had all this federal money that came in because we're a sales tax state. We had a lot more sales tax revenue coming in because of the huge levels of inflation. Yet we were unwilling to be a good financial partner to cities and counties when it came to addressing the public safety challenges. And I think the average voter in Washington, that's what they wanted us to do. And to me, this is how you change that silo way of thinking. Like, we get a lot of money in the state coffers from cannabis taxes. It's $500 million a year. Only $20 million of that actually goes to cities and counties to deal with this. If you have a different governor, you can actually fundamentally change how you think about that problem. And when I talk about public safety, it's not just hiring and training more police officers. You have to do that, but it's also making sure there is access to behavioral health treatment, there is access to substance abuse treatment. If you just have a different financial approach where the state says, we don't care who's responsible for the problem. If we have money, instead of us starting a brand new program, who knows if that program is going to work 10 years from now, we're going to say what we need to solve right now is public safety, and that is what I commit to doing as governor. That's what I've demonstrated through my policies in the Senate. That's why I have the endorsements from the law enforcement community, is because I'm trying to get bills passed that we know we can pass, and we have done that the last couple sessions. I think Semi Bird is right. This has happened on Democrats' watch. If we're going to be intellectually honest with ourselves, we have to acknowledge we have dropped the ball on public safety, and that is one of my primary reasons, that and affordability, of why I'm running for governor, is if we can't make progress on public safety in Washington immediately in the very near future, the state just doesn't achieve its full potential. But I am optimistic that it can be done, and I'm excited, and I think, you know, I see a fellow officer, an officer here, where I think Semi's right. You need a governor who's going to publicly stand up and say, I appreciate the sacrifices their officers are making on a daily basis. Because if I've done this campaign, I've met way too many police officers where their grandpa's a police officer, their dad or mom is a police officer, they're a police officer, and they are nervous about their own kid. They're not sure they want their own kid to go into that profession anymore. And if that isn't a wake-up call to every Democrat in the legislature that the pendulum has swung too far, I don't know what is. People should be proud to keep, you have generational families that have devoted their life to public service and law enforcement, and you want to make sure that we're a state where that can continue to happen.
Absolutely. And just, I'll let you jump in, but just real quick on that, I should have said probably, I too had a badge, and it was federal. So when I served with the United States Department of Energy, I was a credentialed federal officer assigned to the National Nuclear Security Administration. My role was weapons of mass destruction. I may have alluded to that, maybe you did not. So if you ever saw a Homeland Security trailer at a Seahawk game, well, that was me as a team leader, as a federal team leader, and what you didn't see was my team that was in that stadium or in that area, or maybe at other huge gatherings, utilizing high-tech equipment, utilizing theories of radio spectroscopy. I guess what I would say is I partnered with local and federal agencies, not only at the highest levels, but the local levels. And in terms of the Blake fix, it's not a fix. If you understand what's going on, and law enforcement actually does, because prosecutors have cases ready to be prosecuted, but the drugs have to go to the Washington State Crime Lab, and they are backlogged. Don't take my word for it. Ask any police chief, ask any sheriff. And by the way, those are my endorsements, because respectfully, I am not a career politician. I have no establishment support or backing, none whatsoever. But I have the people's backing, and that's what I'm going to continue to seek. So I have endorsements from sheriffs across the state, and they're continuing to grow day by day by day. Why? Because the sheriffs are elected by the people. And you'll see a pattern in my campaign and my support. You'll see a pattern of commonality and common sense. That I will give you an answer with specificity. I can go into deep with Blake, the Blake fix, the gaps, the fact that we say that there's this and there's that, but in fact they get 2 times. And the sentence is weak. And we know they're never going to even touch jail unless something extreme happens. So it's still not there. And I hope we talk about schools. I really do. So we're going to do questions and answers.
Well, and I just want to give you a few more minutes to touch on the last thing, and then we'll open up the questions and answers, because we're going to close this at 10. So is there any?
We can go to questions.
Okay. I just want to make sure everyone's got schools is a good question. Is anyone here have something they want to ask Richard?
So, as you know, our community here was the energy center for the state with coal production. We used to work for the Department of Energy, you know this. And you've been involved in our lives in the capital budget. But one of the things that's changing for us is we're trying to re-engage and bring new jobs to our area. The 2 industries that seem to be most interested in us right now are fusion and hydrogen. And kind of curious how you guys feel about both those industries. Are you for them? And what do you think of the opportunity to transform Lewis County and bring new jobs in, and in the energy hub and the energy sector? So,
I think climate change is real. We have to take things to fight it. But what I think is also very real is you're going to have to acknowledge, well, I mean, there's hydrogen, I think is great. Fusion's good. I think just nuclear is a super viable option in terms of clean energy you can produce that we don't have to reinvent the wheel on. It already exists. And the beauty, I think, of when you do that in places that used to have a coal facility is the hundreds of millions of dollars of transmission infrastructure that it takes to get those facilities up and going already exist. You don't have to build all that new infrastructure on the transmission side. You just need to start producing energy in a different way at that previous facility. And I think if you want to think about, I think how we can set an example for the rest of the world when it comes to fighting climate change is, how do you transition previous coal facilities to different energy facilities? And right here in our backyard is a perfect example of where you can be a poster child for the rest of the country and for China and other places in the world that need to do the exact same thing going forward. I think it's a huge opportunity. I mean, we applied, as the chair of the capital budget, we put down the match to try to make our state one of the hydrogen hubs. And hopefully, I think we will succeed at achieving that, which draws down almost $1 billion of federal funding for us to focus on hydrogen here. And I think when it comes to nuclear, I just have a very different mindset than I think a lot of other Democrats in the legislature do, where to me it just comes down to math. If you're going to add, electric cars to the charging grid.
You're talking non-nuclear fusion.
You're talking non-nuclear fusion, I know. And I think that's fascinating. I just don't know if that technology will be interesting if the non-nuclear fusion gets up and running in time to actually solve the energy crisis I think our state's going to have in the next 5 years. And so I think, to me, I'm kind of open to all of the above, but I think you need to be producing energy out of the facility down here as quickly as possible, because we want to take advantage of the transmission grid that already exists. And I just don't see any way. I mean, wind and solar are great, but you need a baseline function as well on top of that. And that's where I think you're going to have to be open-minded as you transition to making those investments.
So this may be one of the only times where we differ a little bit, but still agree. The answer would be yes. 100% am I open to it? Yes. Am I familiar? Yes. I have an unfair advantage. Yeah, when you work with the Department of Energy, retire from the Department of Energy, and you're a leader in the Department of Energy, well, you have knowledge of energy, and I do. Climate change. Okay, that's different from environment, but yet it's lumped into environment, right? Two different things. And at what cost? So you have China that is enriched and produces more carbon into the environment, and we make all these deals that continue to enrich China, but we sacrifice, we give, and we have the lowest carbon signature ever, and we continue to penalize our communities and restrict our communities, but yet we'll pop windmills up in every landscape. And by the way, those windmills, the cost to put them up and to maintain them based on the return on investment, please someone look into the price and the return on investment. You'll be very disappointed. Again, don't take my word for it. You'll be very disappointed. I do agree with what Mark said. Just separate than what you said, I'm going to go with portable nuclear energy 100%, and yes, I will bring it in. Not at our cost, but at the corporate contractor's cost. They will pay for it, right? And then we will tax the heck out of it. And that money that we're going to be relieving off the citizens so we can stop overtaxing citizens. And while I'm on this thing and bringing the fire a little bit here, we're going to repeal cap and trade, because that impact on our fuel that we pay at the pump every 5 seconds, that is ridiculous. But so again, this climate change, it's driving us into bad places for Washington State. And it doesn't make sense if you think about it. It's hurting Washington citizens. And I've looked at it, I've studied it. Again, I retired from DOE. I know better. And I wish more citizens knew better, so that they would stop doubling down and hurting Washington citizens with all these policies for the sake of climate change that is not giving us the return on investment. It's time to put Washington citizens' lives first. And it's not just people at rich levels, it's people at all levels, people who are impoverished. They're already suffering right now with inflation and everything else. And now we're adding where we were the highest fuel rate in the nation. And now we're playing back and forth with California. We should never be there. All right? Hydro, 64.6% of all energy comes from carbon-free hydro. Nuclear is carbon-free. We can do better. And if we want to talk about climate change, again, there's carbon-free right now, and that is good enough. So people before this climate change ideology, and I'm smart enough to know that what we have been doing, we're not getting that return on our investment. It's hurting our citizens.
So, we have just a few more minutes. Is there other questions? Because I think somehow you did bring up a good one that I would like you both to respond to, and that is about the schools and how we're doing. What would grade would you give our overall school system, and how would you fix it? And try and keep it to just a couple of minutes, but I think it is an important topic. Mark?
I said my wife Kelly teaches in Issaquah, the elementary school level, and she has, for the last 20, 25 years now, and all 6 of our kids went through the Issaquah public schools. I think my whole ladder out of poverty in Tukwila was through the public school system, in Tukwila growing up. To me, you're never going to be successful unless you have a strong K-12 public school system. I think Semi mentioned equal access to opportunity. That's where that starts, is in the public school system. And I think I've been on, because I've had the record in the legislature of the most kids in the public schools during my time there, so I've been on that education committee for the last 10 years, and we can do a lot better when it comes to our public schools. And I think a starting point is the local levy dollars need to be focused on doing local programs. And I think we've had this fight, and I fought it with members on my own side of the political aisle, of just saying the state is paying the COLA for our teachers in our public schools. We've been doing that all the way back to the 2017 session. We paid the COLA every single time, so they all get a cost of living adjustment. What isn't sustainable for our schools going forward, and this doesn't happen down here in Lewis County as much, but I'll tell you it happens a lot in King County, is you end up having like a double or a triple COLA that comes out of local levy dollars on top of the state COLA. And then when those happen, it becomes financially challenging for the school districts to actually keep all the local programs going that really actually change kids' lives. And so an example for my wife, she got a 5.5% COLA from the state last year. On top of that, she then got a 4% local COLA. But when they had to come up with the money for the additional 4% local COLA, they had to lay off a bunch of people. And my wife was like, I'd rather have the paraeducator in my class than have the extra 4% and no paraeducator. And so this is the mindset, I think, going forward that we really have to change, is really empower every school board member, specifically in King, Pierce, and Homish County, I think, to say, hey, you can trust the state. They're gonna give a cost of living adjustment to the teachers, but rating those local levy dollars to do like double or triple of that is not gonna be sustainable if we want our kids to have a successful school outcome. But I'm optimistic that can change, and our public schools can be some of the best in the country. We just need different leadership.
I love what Mark had to say, I really do. And so, truth and disclosure, I served in the school board all the way up until last August, before I was recalled from the school board. And I want everybody to know that. Why was I recalled from the school board? Not pilfering money, not misappropriation, nothing like that, right? Not anything. Well, I'll tell you. What was so nefarious? Well, we ushered in a policy set that we're going to teach civics to our students, we're going to leave politics out, and we're not going to teach critical race race. We're not going to teach a child that the color of their skin determines their outcome in life, because this is America, and that suppresses a child to a mindset of failure because they're born black, right? No, this is America. We passed a policy that said if you're going to teach anything controversial, you will get parents' permission, because that's the right thing to do. And then we had the nerve to say that this mandate, which was killing children, we had the highest suicide rate in the state of children in our school district. High suicide rate. We had a mental health crisis with our children in our school district. We had lost learning off the charts in our school district. So for no other reason than to preserve and to protect the lives of our children, yes, I made a motion as a school board director, because that's where my oath was, to protect our children, to honor the voices of those parents that were crying out for help, those special needs parents, right? Of those special needs children. And so I brought that motion forward, and it was successful for a matter of 72 hours, right? And then the other two board members reversed, because the superintendent, in collaboration with the teachers union, shut down the school. So the schools reopened right away. But yet the folks on the other side, knowing what we had done, said, no, we're going to recall all 3 of these board members. Are you still tracking with what I'm saying? The mask mandate was their reason. And then they tried to say some kind of OPMA, which was not. So, schools. Only 57.7% of all students met grade level standards in English and language arts when you average out performance across all school districts in Washington State. Only 37.7% of all students met grade level standards in math when you average out all those school districts. And only 42.7% of all students met grade level standards for science. But yet we graduate them at an 87% or 83% rate. So we're failing them academically, but we're relatively successful at kicking them out the door and say, good luck with your future, at a cost of $16,972, give or take a buck. This is bad return on investment. Again, I'm a behavioral scientist and performance consultant, and so I look at the numbers, I look at the cause, the effect, I look at the science and the value stream behind everything. This is the leadership you're gonna get when I become your next governor, if the will of the people carries forward. Because our school system is failed, and yes, Mark's 100% right. I want equal access, which is why I support school choice, so that all families, regardless of your social, economic standing, has access to a quality education. My child was raised in the public school system until the shutdown. And then once I raised my head out of the sand and start looking into how our public school system was operated, I pulled my child out of the public school system, and I will never put my child back into the public school system until we fix the public school system, because I know what's happening in there. And you know what happened with Senate Bill 5599, that transgender act that says you can separate a child from a parent. And that child, because that child at a young age says, I'm a boy and I want to be a girl now. And that child can go to school and not come home, and that parent will not know where their baby is. That law was passed. It's a law now. And I'm not against gay or trans, quite the opposite. I value and love everyone. But my point is, children don't belong to the state. Children belong to the families. And if we're going to devalue the rights of parents, the primary stakeholders in children's lives, and grandparents, then we've devolved too far as a state. And we must reclaim our common sense and say, no, there's a better way. We don't have to legislate this. Stop compromising the innocence and the lives of our children and start valuing the rights of parents and grandparents. We need leadership for a change. And that does not come into a package of a career politician. It comes in the package of a career American. That is the change that Washington State needs. That is the change that Washington State deserves. Thank you all for your time today. I appreciate it.
Thank you. A chance to say a closing comment and encourage everybody here. Primary next year. Vote. Mark, you want to say one final comment?
I appreciate everyone coming out today. I think you guys have been fortunate to have really good representation in Olympia from the 20th district. I think, Peter Armano has done a great job coming in. I think Ed Orcott I've worked with Ed during my time in there as well, and Senator John Braun, I think, is one of the most thoughtful legislators we have in Olympia. And I think this part of Washington plays a critical role to the economic success of our state. And I think in the capital budget, I've always supported the Chehalis River Basin Plan, because I've always appreciated that we can't have the I-5 corridor shut down during a flood event, because it's just economic crippling to the state of Washington. And I think this has been my focus in the capital budget, is to say there's a lot more to the state of Washington than just King County. And the reason the capital budget passes 49-0 is because we have a different approach to that budget than the other budgets in Olympia. We actually sit down with people from every county, and we make sure we're doing things in a public policy level that benefits all 39 counties in our state. And I think my whole goal of running for governor is to bring that exact same mentality I've had during my work on the capital budget to every single budget that we have in Olympia. I'm optimistic it can get done, and I think there is a lot. And this is an exciting part of Washington State in terms of growth potential, and I'm fully committed to making it happen. And I want to make sure people know, since I announced for governor, this is what I've just been driving around the state of Washington. It's a beautiful state. There's amazing, great communities throughout our state, and I really want to have something where people feel there's actually a governor in Washington that represents them, even though they're not living in Kings, Snohomish, or Pierce County. They're actually feeling like they're represented, even though they're outside of that core population base of our state. I'm optimistic it can happen. I think everyone coming out, and you know, it was really nice actually. This is our first time actually being together in a room, so you guys made it happen. I like it. This is excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And a true gentleman, and I mean that. I really do mean that. Thank you. Day one, I'm going to call for a third-party audit of all state programs and all state offices. I conduct audits. I know how to do it. I won't be doing it because I'll be the governor. But does knowing help? Yes, it does. You know what to expect. You know how to get it done. And you know, by the way, acquisitions, procurement, and contracts. That helps as well. People in Eastern Washington and other counties throughout the state do not feel included by what happens on the west side. There's a fracture there. So far as people are saying, we want to separate at the Cascades. We don't want anything to do with the west side of Washington. That is a shame. But that is the reality of what we live in. And I agree 100% with what Mark's saying. My friends, you walk outside and you see what's going on in the streets. Mental health crisis, addiction crisis. We have created that through bad laws, bad legislation. Stop and look with your own eyes. And in the inner city, most of my family are Democrats. So I don't hate on Democrats. I think I said that from the very beginning, right? Because I love my family. I love everybody. It's not a Democrat, Republican. I get tired of the nonsense. With our own eyes, we see the garbage on the streets. We see the highways disrepair. We see it all. Bad management, bad leadership, and that doesn't sound nice. But people need change. We need someone with a resume, with the skill sets to bring about the necessary change, to bring the solutions with actions, because we cannot afford more of the same. We cannot afford more political action. We need solutions. Solutions that will restore our state, as Mark said, to its beauty that God gave us. So that power is in the hands of all of you. It's in the hands of the people. And it's a matter of the people standing up and reclaiming their self-governance, reclaiming their power. That is what America is. Please stand with us. Please stand with me. birdforgovernor.com. Thank you, and God bless you guys.